Everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining today's webinar, Preparing for the Most Dangerous Quantum Scenario, presented by ATPGov. My name is Jason Gostetic, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. Before we get started, just a couple of quick housekeeping notes. We'll keep everyone on mute during the presentation, but we want to hear from you. So please drop your questions in the Q&A as they come to mind. Also, we'll save time at the end for a live Q&A with our presenter. Also, today's webinar is being recorded and will be available for playback. So if you miss anything or want to share it with colleagues, you'll have access to it afterward. With that, I'm excited to introduce our speaker today, Joey Swartz, Quantum Security Strategist with ATPGov. Joey supports combatant commands and foreign military sales at ATPGov. A former U.S. Army major and graduate of the John F. Kennedy Special Warfare Center and School, Joey brings operational insight into the topic of emerging technology and national security. He is a frequent speaker on quantum computing threats and holds degrees from the University of Minnesota and its law school. With that, I'd like to turn today's event over to Joey. Joey, the stage is yours.
All right, Jason, thanks very much for your introduction. Thanks everybody for attending today. We have titled this presentation, Preparing for the Most Dangerous Quantum Scenario, and I'll give you a little bit of background about why we went that particular direction in a little bit. But real quick, just wanted to introduce you to ATPGov and who we are. So federally focused value-add reseller and what I like to call a boutique integrator. I say boutique because we have the ability to give that really high touch, high attention, small business service ethic, as well as big business capability. We have a 40,000 square foot facility where we can integrate a number of different things. We have a number of different ISO certifications, contract vehicles, and a really wide range of core capabilities, especially in advanced technologies. And that can be anywhere from cybersecurity and AI to, you've seen tactical tech there on the slide. We have, for example, even UAS and counter UAS capabilities. So one of the things I love about ATPGov is it's just a focus on what's coming next, and that's sort of why we're here for quantum. We're a trusted partner for mission critical technology, and we're here to start helping federal agencies adopt some future ready technology, especially around that post-quantum cryptography. I'm not going to belabor my introduction anymore. The slide is there for when you, if you want to look at the slides later, that'll give you a little bit of background on myself. And what I wanted to do is we have a wide range of folks coming in that may have several different levels of understanding about what quantum computing is. So before we get into the threat from quantum computing, before we talk about what ways we might be able to protect ourselves in the future, I just wanted to level set on what quantum computing is, right? So it's quantum. The word quantum is coming from quantum mechanics, right? And so we have in physics two different types of physics. We have what are called classical physics. Think of your Looney Tunes dropping anvils and all that sort of stuff, things that are very easy to sort of see and measure in the physical world. And then you have quantum physics or quantum mechanics. And this is where you start getting into things where something can be both a wave and a particle instead of just one, which it would be under classical physics. And that's where you start moving into different things like the multiverse you've seen in different comic book films. The entire idea of a multiverse or multiple realities or multiple states of matter hinges on that idea of quantum physics versus classical. So that's where we take that particular term. In this instance, what we're doing is for quantum computing, classical computing, we've got our flat chip and we've got our silicon printed on it, and then we're running our electrical impulses through there to get zeros and ones. Quantum is very different in the sense that we're trying to actually capture atoms and we're trying to manipulate those atoms. And the reason that we're trying to do that is instead of using just a bit, we're creating a qubit. So instead of my state being either 0 or 1, like binary computing that we have in our existing systems, it's 0, 1, or something in between. So that gives me essentially a third axis, if you remember the axes from math class. It gives me a third axis at which I can compute, and that means that I have an exponentially larger amount of parallel processing that I can do. So that's really quantum computing is taking atoms, manipulating those so that we can have multiple states, multiple outcomes, and it allows us just to have much more powerful computing. Now, the one caveat I will say is that it's still in its infancy, okay? There's, for the existing way that we do quantum computing, there is a requirement to have almost near zero temperatures, very, very cold temperatures, in order to keep the atoms stable and to be able to manipulate them. That's changing. There are different architectures being put out now, lots of experiments going on, and that will probably not be the final architecture that we work with, but it is our starting point. And so it means there are some real technical challenges for how much quantum computing we can do. So with that idea of what quantum computing is, the real question is, well, why does it matter? The first reason I would say it matters is it's a lot closer than you'd think. I did just give you some caveats about challenges we have, where things are in kind of the experimental stage. But the race to quantum is in full force. It's very real. China, Russia, and the US are all investing billions of dollars in research and development to try and be the first one to get there. The reason we're trying to be the first ones to get there are not just for the increased power it will give us in terms of the actual computational side of things, but because that increased power actually makes the encryption vulnerable. All right, so today's encryption, by and large, will not survive what's called Q-Day. And the reason it won't is because of something in mathematics called Shor's algorithm. Shor's algorithm essentially says, given enough time and enough compute power, I can actually reverse engineer, I can use an algorithm to figure out the encryption underlying something. Now, today, with existing classical computers, we have, a sort of lowish amount of compute capability, and that means we'll have a really high time. So it's going to take centuries to crack a code, to crack the encryption that we use today if we're using classical computers. Because quantum is so much more powerful, it lowers that time horizon. And because it's lowering that time horizon, that means something that would have taken centuries with classical computing, at a certain level of quantum capability, it becomes a matter of, days or weeks. And so there are some encryption methods like AES 256 that will be more resistant to Q-Day, but there are a whole host of encryption algorithms and methodologies that will just fall like dominoes. They're going to underpin, it's going to be TLS and emails. It'll be the underlying encryption in DocuSigns, any number of different things. So the risk is really, really broad across a number of different methodologies. There is some concern, there's some intelligence that bad actors, especially the more organized state-backed cyber criminals, are harvesting sensitive data today, that they're essentially betting on the sort of nearness of quantum capability and the ability to decrypt that data, in 2 years or 3 years or whenever, and they'll still have some valuable data in there depending on what the particular information is. So kind of taking the way that those work, I go back and put my military hat on from when I was an Army officer. And, when we would plan operations, we would plan for the most likely course of action, right? What do we think our enemy will do? But we always had a plan for the most dangerous course of action. And that most dangerous course of action is really where quantum fits, because we don't know exactly when Q-Day hits, right? Q-Day is the day at which we have a commercially viable, a commercially relevant quantum computer that just about anybody can get their hands on. You don't have to be a government or a government contractor with a ton of money to be able to have a little experimental box. It's one where we can start building them ourselves and using them. And so the goal for today is to understand how we can begin preparing for that threat. We may not do every single thing for a most dangerous course of action, but we may have some of those things prepped, or we might start to do some of the protections in the anticipation that the most dangerous course does become real. So in this instance, think, for example, on a spectrum of zero preparation to, boy, we got to get everything done in 6 months and be ready for post-quantum cryptography. It's dangerous to not prepare for it at all at this point. I mean, it's not a good course of action. And there's a huge heavy lift in terms of getting to perfect post-quantum cryptography ready. It's probably not going to happen in 6 months to a year, even if you wanted it to. So what we're going to try to talk about today is what exists on the market today in order to start that process and be able to start protecting workloads against quantum threats. So a lot of people ask, do quantum computers exist yet? They do exist. They are only in lab and research settings. I mentioned some of the things that they're hard to stabilize. They have a near zero temperature. They're not yet commercially viable. But there are some caveats to that today, right? So IBM and Google they've been able to put together, 1,000 qubits worth of quantum compute capability with great expense and great effort. But for example, Quantinuum, which is one of the largest integrated quantum computing companies in the world, they just did an experiment with JP Morgan Chase where they were able to actually show a much more efficient processing of the RCS algorithm, like 100x more efficient processing using a quantum computer, a 56-bit qubit quantum computer versus a similar classical computer, right? There's also something called Moore's law. If you remember that, it said something along the lines of every 18 months we double our compute power, and for many decades that was correct. Everything just was twice as efficient with the new models that came out. Less so today as we've gotten more toward maturity. But the point in this particular instance is that with quantum, it's actually our quantum compute capability is 10x every 18 months. It is a factor of 10 every 18 months in terms of the new power and capability. So that tells you that things are moving along pretty quickly. So it's not like it's just sci-fi at this point. It really comes down to an issue of nation-state competition and quantum intelligent risk, right? Well, yes, there's nothing commercially viable yet. You can't just go buy a quantum computer in a reasonable way, but the R&D is backed by the nation-state actors that we've had challenges with. The U.S. is doing the same thing, right? We've partnered with tech leaders like Microsoft. They just announced the new chip architecture for Majorana, and they're focused on, can I make chips with just a few qubits and then scale it so I have a larger system, right? In the end, that quantum supremacy can shift information dominance and a global advantage. So that's really the risk. Even though quantum may be a number of years away, we do not want to wait for Q-Day, okay? I've mentioned harvest now, decrypt later. Even if they aren't harvesting now, decrypting later, that Q-Day still opens up a huge amount of information, especially medical, financial, and intel data. So resilience is something that we're going to have to build up before the breakthrough, because ultimately there's simply too much to do. The ubiquity of encryption in any number of systems, and it's done in any number of ways. We have to start now if we're going to be prepared for it. So let's talk about our gaps, some legacy risks, and some compliance pressure. So there is quantum risk. Quantum risk is on the policy radar. There is government guidance already here. National Security Memorandum on promoting United States leadership in quantum computing was published back in May of 22 under the Biden admin, and essentially said, hey, you need to start making the inquiries, you need to start doing the things needed to be able to prepare for quantum risks. We need to start moving toward post-quantum cryptography. And they set a goal of mitigating as much quantum risk as possible by 2035. So we are well on our way to start doing that. There were some changes under the Trump administration. So there were a few policy changes that were focused less on regulating and creating additional compliance paperwork that the Biden admin had in place, and the Trump administration said, hey, instead of coming in and giving people some really narrow things that they need to hit, we want to make sure that we're enabling people and agencies to get to PQC as quickly as possible. So the focus is on building lists of product categories, what products are supporting post-quantum cryptography. And then getting people moved over to TLS 1.3, which is going to be a more quantum resistant protocol. So the Trump admin, some folks have said, well, the Trump admin undid the quantum initiative. Absolutely not correct. It was first put in place by the Trump administration, the first Trump admin. It was added on to by the Biden administration, and even though there have been some changes as of June this year, by a new Trump executive order, there still is a mandate to start preparing for that post-quantum future. So let's talk about why early action on PQC matters. Our last crypto transition was when we implemented RSA, and it started back in the 70s. It took decades to finish implementing. And that's just the way it is with crypto. So much of it is baked into the actual systems and software that we're using, as well as, added on, bolted on. So there's a lot of interplay. There's a lot of dependency that goes on, and making sure that things are working smoothly is how we're going to actually get to that next step. Q-Day is not going to be announced. So I like to tell people and liken it to when DeepSeek was announced. Everybody remembers how much NVIDIA and other chip makers took a hit for a couple of weeks, because all of a sudden DeepSeek comes out of nowhere and it upends the paradigm. And some of it played out where it wasn't really as long-term of an effect as we thought it would be. But Q-Day won't be announced. We will wake up one morning and somebody will have commercially relevant quantum compute capability. We don't know if it's going to be the US or China or Russia. But when it does happen, encryption is everywhere, especially in defense and intel systems. So there's going to be a lot of vulnerabilities. Another reason early action matters is not just because of the risk and the fact that it'll be a surprise one morning. It's because it's going to take time. Not every system is compatible with post-quantum cryptography. One of the hallmarks of post-quantum cryptography is we're working with much larger strings of numbers, much larger encryption algorithms. And so even if you have something that is a particularly good fit for implementing post-quantum cryptography, and I'll use VPN as an example, you can implement PQC into VPNs today and have a quantum-resistant VPN. But you need to make sure the hardware also has the processing power sufficient to support that, so that you're not having huge amounts of lag time in your VPN because it's spending all its resources processing those much larger numbers. Moving too late will mean you'll scramble under pressure, and if you're scrambling under pressure for something like this, you're going to make a lot more mistakes. You're going to have a lot more downtime. So taking a phased approach is really mitigating your operational risk for later. So how do we build that foundation? What can we actually do today? Like I said, I've talked to a number of customers, and the first question they always have is, I know what we need to be doing. I understand the risk from Q-Day, but what's actually available now? Okay. So quantum resistant VPNs are the sort of easiest one in terms of conceptualizing it and being able to just build it into your operation. So Palo Alto and Fortinet both offer quantum resistant VPNs. I wouldn't say they're the only ones, but they're sort of the biggest ones that I would look at this point. And Palo Alto especially has a really great ability to not only secure the VPN point to point among the firewalls, but also between the firewalls and the workstations as well. They just released a new update for PenOS, and so it's a really slick, really smooth setup. Quantum random number generators. Much of the focus goes to post-quantum cryptography and those 5 algorithms that NIST has certified as quantum safe. However, one thing that we don't think about a lot is the way we actually generate the numbers. If you are using a sort of standard number generation in your Windows environment, for example, those random numbers that go into the encryption algorithms, those are typically what are called pseudo random number generation, right? It's algorithmic. So there's yet another way to reverse engineer. If I can reverse engineer the algorithm that's generating my random numbers, then I have another method of attack. So quantum random number generators actually take photons or something that is subject to quantum mechanics, and then they use that to actually generate the randomness. Quantinuum is a company that has taken that quantum computing where they're using photons to generate random numbers and randomness so that you couldn't engineer it. It's not deterministic. And they've taken that quantum seed and they've built it into a software package. So I can actually start to bring true randomness to the number generation that's coming from my Windows boxes or my Red Hat boxes and things like that. Compliance and posture platforms. So one of the things I like to tell people is that if you're going to take this quantum journey, it's going to take a long time, okay? You really should start with an assessment of where you're at. And IBM Quantum Safe and ExtraHop both have platforms to be able to do that, where they can start to actually inventory what the cryptography elements are in an environment. So getting an understanding of where you're at, as well as what's going on in your network, right? Is somebody using post-quantum cryptography algorithms? That could be an indication of somebody actually moving data, and you're not sure how you're going to be able to inspect those packets because somebody's using PQC to actually move them. So it's really important to have that understanding of where the environment's at, what's happening from a real-time perspective, and then being able to measure over time what have we done to actually increase the quantum resistance in our environment. Also, as we go forward and it becomes more and more supervised by folks at NSA and a number of different regulatory agencies, you're going to want to be able to have reporting. You're going to be able to want to show, not just tell, hey, this is what we've done, this is our compliance posture. And then as you set these standards in place, how is it we make sure that our employees or our colleagues are using the same post-quantum cryptography methodologies that we've decided to transition to. So having that compliance and that just current posture and historical look platform is really going to be huge for doing something that's going to take anywhere from 2 to 10 years, depending on how many resources somebody puts into it. Application scanning and remediation is going to be a key thing as well. IBM Quantum Safe has capabilities to be able to scan the actual static code and make sure that we're building in post-quantum cryptography into the actual CI/CD pipeline. There's also the ability to put together from that IBM Quantum Safe platform what are called adaptive proxies, right? So remember, I may not be able to put PQC. It's not just like plugging in a setting, right? I'm not going to be able to put PQC in every single piece of software that I have or every single platform I have. So what I can do as an intermediary step, I can start by getting my posture. I can understand where my sort of risk factors are, and I can incorporate that post-quantum cryptography into the CI/CD pipeline. But I can also have that adaptive proxy in front that allows me to take advantage of post-quantum cryptography without having to actually refactor all of my applications at once. Again, if we're going from a phased approach, we're going to have a blended set of applications and platforms, and so we want to make sure that we're giving some sort of proxy capability when we can't get to those application refactors right away. And finally, PQC strengthened access management. So Quirks takes away the need for the certificate-based access management and gives an actual role-based, permission-based access management. And it does so using a post-quantum cryptography. Essentially, it's building a Rubik's Cube that was developed from the truly random number generation. And if you don't have exactly the right cryptographic access at exactly the right moment, it's akin to frequency hopping almost. You're not going to be able to access the systems. So it's a great way to strengthen things and eliminate the issue of expired certificates, copied certificates, stolen certificates, because you can't actually steal the certificate to get access. So I'll just sort of close things out by reminding folks that we're a trusted partner in quantum cyber defense. Okay, ATPGov is the only value-add reseller, to my knowledge, that is working in this space. It's a very new space at this point. We have a lot of federal expertise just from past performance in other areas that we work in. And we work across multiple quantum cybersecurity PQC solution vendors. And that's one thing that is really, really, really important, I think. Okay. Yes, we have the expertise across Fed and DoD and Intel, but this is a space where it's new and things are evolving very, very quickly. So the question is, do you as an integrator, do you as a government agency, do you want to be the one responsible for the research? Do you want to be the guy that's got to keep up with everything? Do you want to go to individual vendors who have, sort of one or the other approach? It's so new that a trusted partner is really, really necessary to navigate the complexity of this transition. We can assess, we can recommend, and we can support phased rollouts. And that's where ATP Gov is really, really going to bring value, is just having that market knowledge on something that is a very, very new market area. So we would love to talk about your quantum readiness. You can schedule a no-cost quantum readiness review with us, and we're happy to do that. If you think that there are other folks within your organization that would like to have an understanding of this topic, I'm also happy to do a private briefing that just like I've done for you. You can join us for follow-on webinars. So we have a webinar coming up on October 16th for IBM Quantum Safe. Very excited about that. And then we'll talk about Palo Alto's approach to quantum, especially through their quantum VPN on November 6th. And make ATPGov your trusted quantum partner. Come to us if you've got a question, if you're even just thinking about, hey, we want to start mapping out what we might do in the next year or two, with our journey to post-quantum cryptography. Give me a call or send me an email, and happy to be part of that transition for you. And with that, I appreciate everyone's time. I don't know if how I'm doing for time here because I have the slides up, but happy to take questions at this point, Jason.
Great, thanks, Joey. We'll begin the Q&A portion of the webinar. You can ask your question in two ways. Either type them in the Q&A panel, or if you prefer to ask your question live, just raise your hand, click the little icon in the lower left corner, and I'll unmute your line and introduce you by name. Standing by for questions. I don't see any questions queued up.
I do see a hand raised.
Let's see here. Oh, there we go. That's Rob. Let me just unmute your line, Rob.
Joey, thank you. Thank you for the very informative briefing. That I love your methodical approach to kind of breaking down this, this I would say impending threat. I think people don't necessarily give it a lot of credence now, but it will be when we hit Q day one day, it'll fundamentally change how we do commerce, how the government operates. I'm very appreciative of you kind of bringing awareness to this upfront before we get to that point of now what do we do, and it fundamentally is a very strong message for our country.
Yeah, absolutely.
No question. Just great. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'll highlight the split that you mentioned. So in the conversations I've had with my combatant command customers this year, I've seen kind of a 50-50 split. Some of them have just said, "Hey, man, this is science fiction. We're not going to deal with it until somebody, forces us to do more than they've already done." And that's certainly, I understand how people might come to that conclusion. I don't think it's the right one. And I think there's a lot of really good cost-effective steps that you can start taking now. But I can see how people get to that conclusion. But the other half of the combatant commands I've talked to, and I've seen it not just at COCOMs, I've seen it at service-specific shows. There's a call for papers and speakers and knowledge on quantum. So the other half of the group is really saying, okay, well, we do need to start figuring this out. And that's where I've had the conversations that people have said, tell me what's available, what's on the market right now. And so that's the approach that we try to take, is really just, what's the practical way that we can do this? What can we talk to you about now? And what can we give you for a roadmap? So we're giving specific solutions as opposed to sort of blue sky thinking. Any other questions or comments from anybody out there?
Don't see any in the chat. Doing a final check here of hands, and I don't see any hands raised. I'll turn it back over to you, Joe, for closing remarks.
Well, hopefully the lack of questions is more related to a thorough job on the presentation than it is boring subject matter. So I appreciate you guys stopping by. Please do reach out. There are a number of combatant commands, including, I think Stratcom has had some requirements in the Skittles contract that was advertised. The folks at SOCOM I've had some great conversations with over the last few months. There is movement there's movement in a number of different areas. So I think you're going to see this continue to gain traction, and I think it's going to continue to be relevant. So do reach out if you have any questions, even if it just comes up in a staff meeting or a planning meeting or future capabilities. Don't hesitate to contact me, and there's a number of ways that we can sort of get you pointed in the right direction now. So thanks very much for your time, and barring any last minute questions, have a good one.
Great. Thanks, Joey. And thanks everyone for joining us today. We hope to see you at a future event. Have a great day.